Joy was only 15 when her world shifted in ways she could never have imagined. After years of living alone with her mother in a modest house on the edge of Appama village, the silence of their lives was interrupted by a wedding. Her mother, still youthful and kind-hearted despite the weight of widowhood, had found love again, or so it seemed. His name was Matthew, a man with a calm voice, intense eyes, and an unsettling stillness in his presence. At first, everything felt like the start of something new and beautiful. Matthew brought stability, laughter, and gifts. He was generous and polite, often helping Joy with her schoolwork or surprising her with small tokens. A necklace here, a storybook there. You're a smart girl, Joy, he'd say with a proud smile that warmed her soul. For a while, Joy believed she had found a father figure, someone who would protect and cherish her like her real father once had. Then came Glory, Matthew's daughter. Slightly older than Joy, Glory was beautiful and graceful, with a constant smile that never quite reached her eyes. She hugged Joy tightly when they first met, whispering, "We're sisters now," but something in her tone fell off, as if it were more of a warning than a welcome. At home, Joy tried to see the good in everything. She arranged her room to make space for Glory, helped her mother in the kitchen, and even painted little flowers on their shared walls to make the house feel more united. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to hope that her family, broken by tragedy, could be whole again. But slowly, cracks began to show. Matthew started watching her more closely, asking about her whereabouts with unusual interest. Glory became cold when no one was looking, quick to dismiss Joy's opinions or undermine her in subtle ways. And Joy's mother, once the firm voice of comfort, seemed more distant, tired, as though weighed down by something unspoken. The warm welcome had begun to fade, and the dream of a perfect family started to unravel. Joy didn't understand it yet, but the shadows were creeping in, and they were just getting started. The silence in the house grew louder with each passing day. Joy could feel it in the walls, in the way her mother avoided her gaze, and in the awkward glances Glory cast her way whenever Matthew entered the room. The once warm home had turned into a place of whispered tension and invisible rules that Joy couldn't understand, let alone follow. School became her only escape. It was a long walk to the village center, where the old missionary school stood beneath wide mango trees. And it was on one of these walks that Joy stumbled upon the little shop that would change everything. Tucked between two worn-down buildings, the shop looked like something from a forgotten storybook, its wooden sign crooked, its shelves lined with old tools, broken radios, and carved trinkets. Curious, Joy stepped in. That's when she met him. He was no taller than her waist, with strong arms, calloused hands, and eyes that held a strange mixture of sorrow and kindness. His name was Ebuka. A dwarf, yes, but there was nothing small about his presence. He moved with quiet dignity, never asking why Joy had wandered in, only offering her a seat and a sweet-smelling biscuit. Their conversations started as nothing, talks about the weather, village gossip, and old tales from the elders. But over time, Ebuka became more than a shopkeeper. He became a listener, a friend. He spoke to Joy like she mattered, like her thoughts were important. Unlike Matthew, who had started speaking to her like she was a possession. Unlike Glory, who seemed more like a rival than a sister. One day, Joy confided in Ebuka. She told him about the change in her home, about Matthew's strange stares and Glory's coldness. He listened quietly, his brow furrowed, his fingers tightening around a piece of carved wood. "You see things clearly," he said at last. "Even when others try to blind you." His words stayed with her. They filled her with a warmth she hadn't felt in weeks. But nothing stays hidden for long in Appama. One evening, as Joy left the shop laughing, Matthew stood in the distance, watching. His face was unreadable, but his eyes burned with something cold, something dangerous. Joy had no idea that her secret friendship had just lit the fuse of a storm far bigger than she could imagine. The silence at dinner that night was different, heavier, like the air had thickened with unspoken words. Matthew's eyes never left Joy. He didn't ask how school went, didn't smile when she passed the salt. He just sat there, chewing slowly, watching her. Even Glory seemed more subdued, her usual smugness replaced with quiet calculation. Joy knew immediately. He had seen her with Ebuka. She barely touched her food. Her mind raced with questions. Did he follow me? How much did he hear? But she said nothing, swallowing her fear and her curiosity in one gulp. Her mother, as usual, was silent, her eyes fixed on her plate like it held answers to questions she couldn't ask. Later that night, as Joy lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she heard voices, low, angry whispers seeping through the thin walls. She was laughing with him. A dwarf, Maria, a crippled nobody. Matthew's voice was sharp, like a blade being unsheathed. She's just a girl, Matthew. It's probably innocent, her mother replied, but her tone lacked conviction. I don't want her around him. It's not right. It makes me look weak. That last sentence chilled Joy to the bone. Why should her happiness make him feel weak? It made no sense, but then again, neither did the way Matthew had been acting possessive, paranoid, as if Joy owed him more than respect. The next morning, Matthew stood by the door as she prepared for school. I'll be walking you today, he said flatly, grabbing his sandals. Joy's stomach tightened. The walk was long and awkward. He didn't speak, didn't look at her. But when they passed the road that led to Ebuka's shop, Matthew stopped and stared down the path. Stay away from that place, he said without turning his head. You've got nothing to gain from people like him. Joy didn't reply. She just nodded, though inside, a storm had started brewing. She didn't understand why Matthew hated Ebuka. He hadn't done anything wrong. He was kind, thoughtful, and never treated her like a child or a burden. And for the first time in her life, someone listened to her, really listened. But now, that friendship had become dangerous. Matthew's warning wasn't just a suggestion, it was a threat. What Joy didn't know was that Glory had been watching too, and she had her own secrets. The walls in that house were starting to crack, and soon, what was hidden behind them would come crashing out. The next few days felt like walking through a minefield. Every word, every glance, every footstep echoed with tension. Joy tried to avoid Ebuka's shop, but her heart pulled her in that direction like a magnet. She needed to feel safe. She needed to breathe. One afternoon, she took a longer route from school, hoping no one would notice. Her feet found their way to the little shop, and there he was, Ebuka, polishing a carved figurine, his face lighting up when he saw her. I was beginning to think you forgot me, he joked softly. I could never forget, she said, her voice trembling. But I think he saw us. Matthew. Ebuka nodded slowly, his expression darkening. Then you must be careful. But the danger had already arrived. Suddenly, the door burst open. Matthew stood there, eyes burning, chest rising and falling like a man barely containing a storm. Joy froze. Ebuka stood tall, despite his height. I warned you, Matthew growled. Is this what you do behind my back? Sneak around with filth. Don't speak to her like that, Ebuka said calmly, but his voice had a sharp edge. She's not a prisoner. She's my daughter. Matthew snapped. No, she's not, Joy shouted, her voice rising like a sudden flame. You're not my father. The words hung in the air like a slap. Matthew's eyes widened. For a moment, he looked almost wounded, but then his jaw clenched, and he took a step forward. You've embarrassed me. You've brought shame into my home. If you like this creature so much, then fine, you'll marry him. Joy's mouth dropped open. What? Ebuka stepped between them. She's not some tool for your pride, Matthew. But Matthew was already gone, slamming the door behind him, leaving behind silence, and a threat that would soon become reality. What began as friendship had now become a weapon, and Joy's life was no longer her own. Joy couldn't sleep that night. Her body lay still on the mat, but her mind was a storm of confusion and dread. You'll marry him. The words echoed over and over again. Was it real? Was Matthew serious? Her mother hadn't said a word since they returned home. She just sat by the window, staring into the dark like she was waiting for a miracle to undo the day. But no miracle came. By morning, everything moved too fast. A village elder was summoned. The town gossip spread like wildfire. Joy is marrying the dwarf boy, the whisper said. Her stepfather is making her. The news turned heads, raised eyebrows, and twisted mouths in disapproval. Joy tried to talk to her mother, hoping for protection, for reason, but she was met with downcast eyes and trembling hands. Just do what he says, her mother whispered, barely able to look at her. Please, don't make things worse. Worse? How could things get worse? Ebuka, on the other hand, stood his ground. When Joy came to him in tears, he didn't flinch. He's using this to humiliate you, he said softly. And me. But if you say no, I'll fight for you. Joy shook her head. He'll never let me go. And if I refuse, he'll make my life hell. Ebuka looked into her eyes. Then we take control. If this wedding will happen, it won't happen his way. On the day of the engagement, Matthew strutted through the village like a conqueror. He thought he had one. The crowd gathered, half in curiosity, half in disbelief. Joy sat beside Ebuka, her face blank, her heart burning. The elder began to speak, but before the first blessing could be given, Ebuka stood up. I have something to say, he announced. And after this, nothing in this village will ever be the same. The wind stilled, the crowd leaned in, and in that moment, Joy realized this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning. The village square fell into a stunned silence as Ebuka stepped forward. Even the birds seemed to pause their song. All eyes turned to the small man who now stood taller than anyone in the crowd, not in height, but in presence. Matthew's smile faltered. Sit down, he barked, his voice sharp with authority. But Ebuka didn't move. His gaze was fixed on the elder, then on the crowd, then finally on Joy. Before this ceremony goes on, the people of Appama deserve to know the truth about him. Gasps rippled through the gathering. The elder looked from Ebuka to Matthew. Ebuka, this is Ebuka interrupted calmly. What's highly disrespectful is allowing a man to parade himself as righteous while hiding the filth of what he's done. Joy's breath caught in her throat. She had no idea what Ebuka was about to reveal. Matthew's face twisted in fury. You're crossing a line you'll regret. But Ebuka only pulled a small, folded letter from his pocket. Years ago, this man, Matthew, was exiled from his former village not for theft, not for poverty, but for violence. Against a girl just a little older than Joy. He was spared jail because her family fled and never pressed charges. But the village banished him. I have the letter from the chief himself. Shock. Whispers. People looked at each other, uncertain. Glory's eyes widened in horror. Even the elders stepped back slightly. Matthew lunged, but was quickly held back by two men from the crowd. Joy stood frozen. 1,000 thoughts collided in her mind. The stares, the control, the silence from her mother. Was this why she never stood up to him? Was she afraid? Ebuka continued, voice steady. This marriage is not about love. It's about power, control, and today it ends. Joy stepped forward, her voice breaking. I will not marry under force. Not like this. Not to prove someone else's pride. Matthew thrashed, screaming about lies, betrayal, and shame. But the people had seen enough. Truth, once buried, had risen, and it could not be silenced again. The engagement was called off, but Joy knew the battle wasn't over, because now Matthew had nothing left to lose. Matthew had never known such disgrace. As the villagers turned away from him, as his carefully crafted image crumbled to dust in front of those he once controlled with quiet dominance, something inside him snapped. Joy saw it, that fire in his eyes. It was no longer the cold, calculated stare of a controlling man. It was raw, unfiltered rage. The village elder, shaken but resolute, ordered Matthew to be questioned by the local council. Glory refused to speak. She clung to her father that night, confused and broken, watching the only man she trusted become a stranger. Back at home, Joy packed her few belongings. Her mother sat silently in the corner, tears trailing down her cheeks. I knew what he was, she whispered, voice quivering. But I didn't know how to protect you. I was weak. Joy knelt beside her. You don't have to be weak anymore. She didn't return to that house. Ebuka offered her a place to stay for the time being, just until the council resolved the matter. His shop had a back room, small but safe, and for the first time in weeks, Joy slept without fear, though not without nightmares, because Matthew was still out there, and he was watching. A week passed. The council hearings began. Witnesses came forward, an old friend from Matthew's past, even a woman from his former village who confirmed Ebuka's claims. It was enough to strip Matthew of any remaining respect. The community turned cold toward him. Glory stopped showing her face in public altogether. But Matthew didn't disappear. No, he watched from the shadows, bitter and dangerous. And one evening, as Joy swept the front of Ebuka's shop, she felt it, that eerie stillness, that chill in the wind. She looked up, and across the street, half hidden behind a tree, he stood, watching, waiting. His eyes no longer held the fire of control. They burned with revenge. Joy stood still for a moment longer, locking eyes with Matthew across the road. But unlike before, she didn't flinch. She didn't turn away. She didn't shrink. She met his stare, steady, unafraid. That night, as Ebuka carefully latched the shop's doors, Joy spoke with a calm resolve. This has to end. Not just the fear, but the cycle. I need to choose a life that's mine. Ebuka looked at her, searching her eyes. What are you saying? I'm walking away. From all of it. Ebuka's expression faltered, just for a second. He had protected her, stood up for her, offered her safety when no one else had. But Joy wasn't rejecting him, she was choosing herself. I'm grateful for everything, she continued softly, but I can't let one man's control push me into another man's arms, not even a kind one. He nodded slowly. Then I'll help you however I can. No expectations. The next morning, Joy did something no one expected. Instead of hiding, she went to the village square alone, chin high, voice clear. She spoke not just to defend herself, but to inspire. I was almost married off like a burden. I was told who I should love, where I should go, and what I was worth. But today, I decide. I am choosing education. I am choosing freedom. I am choosing healing. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Some shook their heads, others smiled. Her mother cried quietly at the back, Glory hidden beside her. But neither tried to stop her. With the help of the local mission and a scholarship funded by a distant NGO, Joy enrolled in a girls' school in the neighboring town. She left Appama with one small bag and a heart brimming with courage. She looked back only once. The village that once saw her as a child bride now whispered her name with reverence. Not because she was a victim, but because she became her own hero. Years passed, but the echoes of Appama never faded. Joy thrived. Education became her armor, her escape, her rebirth. She didn't just study, she soared. In time, she returned to the village, not as the timid girl who once walked in the shadows of men, but as a confident young woman, standing tall in her own light. The village gathered to welcome her, some with pride, others with quiet shame. Even Glory peeked from behind the curtains, older now, softer. Matthew was no longer in Appama. His name, once feared, now faded into a cautionary tale whispered between parents and daughters. Joy didn't come to boast. She came to build. With a grant she earned, she opened a learning center for girls right where her story nearly ended. A place for voices to grow. A place for healing. And on the wall, carved into the stone, were these words: strength is not in who saves you, but in who you choose to become. Joy smiled, watching the next generation walk through doors she once dreamed of. The past didn't define her, it shaped her, but she defined her future. And the girl who was almost silenced now teaches others to speak.